Hi everybody, welcome to another makeover. And in today's video, I'm going to be transforming this beautiful dresser. And that's the only footage of the before I got, because for some reason my camera didn't save the footage with all drawers in. Then it took me a while to pull those drawers out, and I just didn't want to go through all that process again to put them back, film it, and pull them out. I hope it's pretty obvious how this dresser looked. This is a modern dresser. It looks like IKEA dresser, but the quality is a bit better. First, I even thought that there was a solid wood because there was nice birch veneer inside and outside, and there was edge banding everywhere, even on the back side of the boards. But then I found that big dents, and yes, this is a cheap board. The whole dresser was covered with that beautiful purple chalk paint, which I couldn't wait to strip off. I actually had several ideas how to transform this dresser, but just for fun and as an experiment, I decided to ask the artificial intelligence for references for my makeover. I used Midjourney, and as a prompt, I typed mid-century modern dresser because I wanted to put this dresser on the legs. So I typed mid-century modern dresser, modern design, paint and wood combination, and I wanted that dresser to be gorgeous. It took about 2 minutes to generate the result, and there we go. 4 gorgeous mid-century modern dressers, according to the AI. I like the dresser on the second picture, and I didn't mind the fourth one. But between those two, I decided to go for the second one. I uploaded the second picture, and I asked Midjourney to generate me more variations of this dresser. And that's what I got. There is some differences between those 4 dressers, but they're pretty much similar. Alright, I got my reference, let's see what I can do. First, I needed to pull out the drawers, the rest of the drawers, and there's a tricky part. 2 of them, they pulled out easily, but one in the middle, it got stuck. One of the sliders was broken, and it took me about 1 hour to take it off because it was kind of complicated. But it was impossible to film, so there we go, abracadabra, the drawer is out. You can see on the background one of the drawers without paint, and that means I had tried different ways to get rid of that paint already, and I found the best solution, and that was using a chemical stripper. I applied first coat of the stripper, I covered it with a tin foil. I used tin foil instead of plastic film, and it works the same way for me. I came back in 10 minutes and I was able to scrape the chalk paint off with my putty knife. But the stripper didn't go farther than the chalk paint coat. It didn't affect the old top coat. So I applied another coat of the stripper off camera, and in 10 minutes I was able to scrape off some of the top coat, but not all of it. The stripper didn't go through all coats of the old finish, but it softened it, so I was able to remove the rest of it with my scraper. Luckily, I only needed 3 drawers fully stripped, and the others I could just calf sand. But because I messed up and I stripped the wrong drawers, I ended up stripping the paint from all 6 drawers. I sanded all 6 drawers with 120 grit sandpaper, and for 3 of them that I wanted to keep wooden, I went to 180 grit and finished with 220. To repair that chip on one of the drawers, I used some Bondo. And once Bondo dried, I sanded it smooth with 220 grit. For the wooden parts of the drawers, instead of using the stain, I mixed the paint wash. For my previous project, I bought 2 colors of the paint. One was the light brown, the other one was dark brown, and I decided to use the same colors for this project. While my paint wash was drying, I moved on to the body of the dresser, but first I prepared the wood for the legs. I didn't have thick enough piece of wood, so I found this scrap wood and I glued it together. This is a birch and this is a perfect match for my dresser. I applied some wood glue, I clamped the 2 pieces together and I let them dry for about 48 hours. The reason why I left them for so long, that's because I had 2 days off. Otherwise, I would probably let them dry over the night. For the body of the dresser, I repeated the same steps with the stripper, but it didn't go as smooth as with the drawers. There were more coats of the chalk paint on the body of the dresser, and as I expected, more coats of an old finish. With the first coat of the stripper, I was able to get rid of the paint, but I had to use my scraper because it didn't came off with my putty knife. The old finish was a polyurethane and I decided to try to sand it with a higher grade sandpaper. I did it with my previous projects and it worked, but not in this case. While I was sanding, it looked like I was getting rid of the old top coat, but no, it didn't happen. Then I applied several coats of stripper. This is a water-based stripper, and you can see that little corner. That's the corner where I was able to sand off the old finish. But it took me about half an hour just for that corner, so sanding wasn't an option. The stripper softened the top coat and I could scrape some of it, but after two applications of the stripper and after hard scraping, the top coat was still there. My guess that the body of the dresser was sanded with 80 or 100 grit sandpaper and then the top coat was applied and then they sanded it smooth and then they applied more and more coats. And finally, I gave up. I decided to leave the old top coat, and to the areas where I exposed the wood, I applied some shellac. And here where I made the mistake, I applied only one coat of the shellac, but I had to apply at least two or three. Before applying any stain to the body of the dresser, I decided to take off the base because I wanted to reuse it for my new base. I was absolutely sure that that base was a solid wood because the way it looked. But no, it turned out that that was edge banding looking like this side of the wood. And yeah, that was the chipboard. So I guess I have to go with the plan B and build my own base from scratches. To stain the body of the dresser, I used the same technique I used for my previous project. I applied two different colors of the paint wash and then I wiped them off with the microfiber cloth. And I repeated 3 times, waiting for about 2 hours in between each application. While the body of the dresser was drying, I came back to the drawers. Following the references I received from the AI, I marked the areas I was going to paint. I primed the drawers first because I had some leftovers of the chalk paint and I had some exposed bare wood and I didn't want to have any bleed through situation. Once my primer dried, I applied the paint. Mostly I followed the colors, the color palette from the references I got, but the orange color, I decided that that was a way too bright. First I applied that brown leather color I had on hand, but I didn't like it and I ended up changing it to the dark beige color. And here's the top after 3 application of my paint wash, and as you can see there is a part where I applied the shellac and it absorbed the stain differently. I could have avoided this situation if I applied 2 or 3 coats of the shellac at the first place, but I learned as I go and to fix the problem I decided to apply the shellac again, but to the whole top. I did it to seal the paint wash I had already applied and to seal that darker spot and to be able to apply more coats of paint wash over and hide that dark area underneath. While shellac was drying, I started building the base. This board is a part of an old bed frame I salvaged from the side of the road. I cut it in half and I was gonna use it as a front and back board and the sides board of my new base. I used my miter saw to cut the board to size I needed and then to get the legs out of the board I had glued, I used the magic clamp. If you don't have any magic clamps, I would recommend you to get one. It's really handy. I was only able to get 2 legs of that board and I cut them at an angle and I was going to use them as the front legs and the back legs I cut out of scrap wood I had on hand. With my orbital sander, I sanded the legs using 120, 180 and 200 grit sandpaper and then I set them aside because I was going to make my custom-made drawer spools. I cut 6 identical pieces of wood and one side of it I cut in an angle. That was my first time building the poles, and I probably should have made a template, but I didn't. I just eyeballed everything and I drew the lines where I wanted my poles to be rounded. To make the sanding part easier, I cut off the edges I just marked and no longer needed. And then I used my orbital sander and 100 grit sandpaper and I shaped the poles. When I was happy with the shape, I jumped to 120 grit sandpaper and I finished with 180. I hand sanded with 180. I was so excited to work with this project, and that's why sometimes I didn't press the record button hard enough and my camera didn't fill some parts, like applying more coats of the paint wash to the dresser, to the body of the dresser, but I did it. And I stained the poles and the legs with the same paint wash combination I used for the body of the dresser. This is how my top looks after applying 2 additional coats of the paint wash over shellac. It completely dried and I was ready to apply some gel stain. I used the same technique I used for my previous project. I applied some gel stain and then I grained it with my graining tool. After I applied the stain to the top and the sides, I didn't wait until it dried. I started wiping it off right away. Last time it dried pretty fast, but this time it dried even faster. After wiping it off with the shop towel, the grain still looked pretty intense. I didn't like it, so I ended up wiping it off with some mineral spirit. I left the top and the sides to dry and moved on to replacing the broken drawer slider. Before dealing with my handles, I applied the top coat to the all drawers. I used a water-based flat polyurethane. And then I spent about 1 hour measuring where the holes should be on the handles, and then I pre-drilled the holes. I measured and drilled the holes in one of the drawers, and then I realized that the front part was attached to the drawer box, and I didn't have the screws long enough to be able to attach my pulls. And most of all, I was afraid to mess up with the pulls and the holes and all that drilling stuff, so I decided to do something else. The pulls were not so much useful as a decorative element, so I decided to glue them to the drawers front using some epoxy glue. Once the epoxy hardened, I applied 2 coats of the polyurethane. It was just easier for me to apply the top coat to those handles when they were attached to the drawers. The gel stain had been drying for 2 days, and before applying my water-based top coat, I decided to seal it with some shellac. While shellac was drying, I started building the base. I screwed the pocket holes in the boards for the base, and in one of them, I found a big crack. This crack could cause splitting in the future, so I had to do something with that, and there was nothing to do but put some epoxy in there. I mixed the epoxy and I added some sawdust. I don't know why I did that, probably because I could. I stirred it for about 30 seconds, filled up the crack with my mixture and let it dry for about 1 hour. Meanwhile, I decided to apply an additional coat of poly to the handles. Once the epoxy hardened, I was able to finish the base. I sealed the base with some poly, and I didn't mention before, the boards for the base, they were already sealed with some shellac. I didn't sand it off, I just lightly scalp sanded and reapplied the top coat. I applied the water-based polyurethane over shellac. The shellac on the body of the dresser was completely dry. I sanded it with 320 grit sandpaper and then I applied my water-based polyurethane, which I shouldn't have done because I haven't attached the base yet. So I applied 1 coat and I let it dry for about 1.5 hours and then I flipped the dresser upside down and attached the base. And after that I applied 1 more coat of poly. I wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you guys who made that far. for all your likes and comments, for all your support. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, I'd really appreciate if you do that. That's free for you and means a lot to me. And we're done here. Officially and finally done. Now let me remind you what I started working with. And here's how this dresser looks now. And my staging area wasn't available at the moment, so I asked the AI to stage my piece. To be honest with you, I'm not really happy with the final results. I don't hate it, but I'm not a big fan. Maybe I should have done bright orange instead of beige color, I don't know. But anyways, I was so excited to communicate with the artificial intelligence, and it was kind of like a challenge for me, so there we go. Thank you so much for watching and see you next Saturday.